The makeup chair felt familiar, too familiar. Chris Hemsworth caught his reflection in the mirror as the artist dabbed concealer under his eyes, erasing the evidence of another sleepless night scrolling through Twitter complaints about his latest film. The studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy, assistants scurrying with clipboards, cameras being adjusted, the distant hum of audience chatter filtering through the walls. "You're looking good, Thor," chirped the makeup artist, a young woman whose name Chris had forgotten despite working with her on 3 different shows this month. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." "Chris?" he corrected automatically, forcing a smile. "Just Chris." She laughed as if he'd made a joke. "Right, sorry, force of habit." The irony wasn't lost on him. Even behind the scenes, he wasn't Chris Hemsworth the person. He was Thor, the commodity, the brand, the walking, talking embodiment of a billion-dollar franchise that had made him rich but left him feeling hollow. A producer appeared at his shoulder, tablet in hand, radiating the kind of caffeinated enthusiasm that came with live television. "Chris! Great to have you here. Tonight's going to be fantastic. Lena's really excited to meet you." "Looking forward to it," Chris replied, the words automatic. He'd given this same response to variations of this same producer on dozens of similar shows. The routine was comforting in its predictability, even if it felt increasingly meaningless. Through the chaos, Scarlett Johansson emerged like a familiar anchor point. She moved with her characteristic poise, nodding to the crew as she made her way over. Her presence immediately lifted Chris's mood, a reminder that beneath all the Hollywood machinery, there were still real friendships to be found. "Well, well," she said, settling into the chair beside him. "Another day, another promotional circus." "You sound thrilled," Chris grinned, genuinely this time. Scarlett's expression grew more serious as she leaned closer. "Have you worked with Lena Hart before?" Chris shook his head. "First time." "Why?" "She's got a reputation." Scarlett's voice dropped to a whisper. "Smart, charming, but she's made a career out of pushing buttons. Remember what happened to Bradley Cooper on her show last month?" Chris vaguely recalled something about an uncomfortable interview, but the details escaped him. "I'm sure it'll be fine. These things always are." Scarlett studied his face in the mirror. "Just be careful, okay? She's not like the others. She digs." Before Chris could respond, the same producer reappeared, practically vibrating with excitement. "Showtime in 5, everyone! This is going to be our biggest episode yet. We've got some really fun surprises planned." Chris stood, straightening his jacket and running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. The familiar pre-show adrenaline began to kick in, that mixture of excitement and mild anxiety that had become as routine as breathing. He'd done this dance 1,000 times before. As he walked toward the stage entrance, he could hear Lena Hart's voice warming up the crowd, her laughter infectious and bright. The audience responded with enthusiasm, their energy palpable even from backstage. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the announcement, "please welcome Chris Hemsworth and Scarlett Johansson." Chris flashed his $1,000,000 smile and stepped into the lights, completely unaware that he was walking into the most career-defining 20 minutes of his life. The studio lights hit Chris like a warm embrace as he strode onto the sleek set, waving to the enthusiastic crowd. Lena Hart rose from behind her curved glass desk, all gleaming teeth and perfectly tousled blonde hair, extending her hand with the kind of confidence that commanded attention. "Chris Hemsworth, everyone," she announced, her voice carrying easily over the applause. "Looking absolutely gorgeous as always." "Thanks for having me, Lena," Chris replied, settling into the plush chair across from her. The audience's energy washed over him, familiar and intoxicating. This was his element. Scarlett took her seat beside him with a polite smile, but Chris caught the subtle tension in her shoulders. He dismissed it. This was just another interview, another chance to charm and deflect with practiced ease. "So, Chris," Lena began, her eyes sparkling with mischief, "I have to ask, do you ever get tired of being ridiculously attractive? Because the rest of us mortals are getting a little sick of it." The audience laughed, and Chris leaned back with mock seriousness. "It's a burden I carry for all of humanity, really. Someone has to set the bar impossibly high." "Oh, please," Scarlett interjected, earning bigger laughs. His ego barely fits through doorways anymore. Chris clutched his chest in exaggerated hurt. "Betrayed by my own co-star. And here, I thought we were friends." We are friends, Scarlett shot back with a grin. Which is why I feel qualified to tell you that you spend more time looking in mirrors than a teenage girl getting ready for prom. The banter flowed effortlessly, each joke building on the last. Chris felt himself relaxing into the familiar rhythm. This was what he excelled at: the quick wit, the self-deprecating humor, the ability to make everyone in the room feel like they were part of an inside joke. Lena watched the exchange with obvious delight, occasionally steering with a well-placed question. Now, Scarlett, you've worked with Chris for years. What's the most annoying thing about him? Just one thing? Scarlett raised an eyebrow. That's hardly fair. Ouch! Chris laughed, genuinely enjoying himself now. And they say chivalry is dead. The audience ate it up, their laughter growing louder with each exchange. Chris could feel the familiar high of performance, of being exactly who everyone wanted him to be. Lena clapped her hands together, her eyes lighting up with theatrical excitement. Okay, this is all very sweet, but I think we need to spice things up a little. You two are clearly comfortable roasting each other, so let's make it official. The audience murmured with anticipation as Lena turned to address them directly. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to play a little game I like to call Friendly Fire. The rules are simple. Chris and Scarlett take turns insulting each other, and whoever makes the audience laugh the loudest wins. It's all in good fun, of course. Chris straightened up, his competitive instincts immediately engaged. Oh, this should be interesting. Don't say I didn't warn you, Scarlett said, cracking her knuckles with theatrical menace. Remember, Lena added with a grin that seemed just a touch too sharp, no holding back. The audience wants to see some real sparks fly. Think of it as therapeutic honesty. The crowd cheered its approval, hungry for entertainment. Chris felt the familiar rush of competition coursing through his veins. This was just another performance, another chance to showcase his quick wit and charm. All right, Chris, Lena announced. You're up first. Give Scarlett your best shot. Chris studied Scarlett for a moment, then leaned forward with a mischievous smile. You know, Scarlett, I've always admired how you manage to look simultaneously bored and constipated in every action scene. The audience burst into laughter, and Scarlett pressed her hand to her heart in mock offense. Wow, going straight for the acting critique. That's cold. Your turn, Lena prompted, clearly delighted by the energy in the room. Scarlett tilted her head thoughtfully. Chris, you're like a golden retriever that learned to lift weights. Beautiful, enthusiastic, and absolutely no idea what's going on most of the time. The laughter was even louder this time, and Chris couldn't help but grin. Ouch! That actually hurt a little. Oh, we're just getting started, Lena said, her voice carrying a subtle edge that neither guest seemed to notice. This is exactly what our audience came for. Real talk between real friends. No more Hollywood politeness, right? The crowd roared its approval, and Chris felt his pulse quicken with anticipation. Come on, you two, Lena interjected, her smile widening as she leaned forward. That was cute, but I think we can do better. Chris, let's be honest. You're basically Hollywood's pretty boy who got lucky with a hammer, right? I mean, what's your range, really? The question hit differently than the previous banter. Chris's smile flickered for just a moment before he forced it back into place. Well, Lena, I demonstrate my range, but I'm not sure this audience is ready for my interpretive dance background. A few scattered laughs, but the energy had shifted. Scarlett glanced between them, her expression growing wary. Oh, come on, Lena pressed, her tone playful but with steel underneath. We all know you're basically a very expensive piece of eye candy. Nothing wrong with that. Own it. Chris felt heat rise in his chest but kept his voice light. Right. Well, if we're being brutally honest, Scarlett, your characters all have the same expression. Somewhere between, I smell something bad, and I'm thinking about grocery lists. The audience's laughter was more nervous now, sensing the shift from playful to pointed. Scarlett's eyebrows shot up, genuine surprise flickering across her face. Wow, she said quietly, then recovered with a tight smile. I was going to make a joke about your accent slipping in every movie, but I think I'll just sit this one out for a minute. Lena practically glowed with excitement. No! This is exactly what we need. Real talk. Chris, tell us what you really think about your Marvel colleagues. Off the record, of course. Nothing's off the record here, Chris said, his competitive edge sharpening into something harder. The audience's energy felt different now. hungry in a way that made his skin crawl, but also challenged him to prove he could handle whatever they threw at him. Chris's jaw tightened as he turned to Scarlett, something darker flickering in his eyes. "You know what? Since we're being honest, maybe if you didn't phone in every performance like you're reading grocery lists, people would take you seriously as more than just a pretty face in a catsuit." The studio went dead silent. Scarlett's face drained of color, her mouth slightly open in shock. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze. "Oh my," Lena breathed, clearly delighted. "Now that's what I call fearless honesty. How does that feel, Scarlett?" Scarlett stared at Chris for a long moment, hurt and confusion warring in her expression. The audience began to murmur, some uncomfortable, others excited by the sudden cruelty. The uncomfortable silence stretched until someone in the audience let out a nervous giggle, quickly stifled. Chris sensed the shift but misread it completely. He thought they wanted more. "Oh, come on," he continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. "We're all thinking it. How many times can you do the same hair flip hip pose combination before people notice you're basically a very expensive mannequin?" A few scattered boos emerged from the crowd. Scarlett's eyes glistened, but she remained silent, her dignity intact even as Chris shredded it. "Chris," Lena said with mock concern, "how far are you willing to go tonight? This is quite a sight of you we're seeing." "As far as it takes," Chris shot back, completely missing the trap being laid. "Everyone wants authenticity, right? Well, here it is." The audience's energy had completely shifted now. What started as excited murmurs had turned to uncomfortable whispers. A woman in the front row shook her head disapprovingly. The applause signs remained dark. Scarlett finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I think maybe we should." "Should what?" Chris interrupted. "Stop being honest? Go back to the fake Hollywood bullshit everyone claims to hate?" The boos grew louder. Something snapped inside Chris as the audience's disapproval washed over him. Years of pent-up frustration, of being reduced to muscles and a smile, of directors treating him like animated scenery. It all came pouring out. "You want to know the truth?" he said, his voice rising above the crowd's noise. "Fine. Let's talk about truth. You think any of this is real? You think Marvel gives a damn about storytelling? It's a factory. And we're just pretty widgets on an assembly line." The audience fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of shock, not anticipation. "I'm tired of pretending that swinging a fake hammer in front of a green screen for the 50th time is meaningful work. I'm tired of directors who think my only job is to take my shirt off and say, 'I am Thor,' with conviction." Lena leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "So you hate your fans? The people who made you rich and famous?" "I don't hate my fans," Chris shot back. "I hate what this industry has turned me into, a walking action figure, a meme. Do you know what it's like to have your entire career reduced to whether you can still fit in a costume?" Scarlett sat frozen, watching her longtime friend and colleague implode in real time. The cameras captured every anguished word, every bitter expression. Every interview is the same questions. Every role is the same character with a different name. God forbid I want to do something that requires actual acting instead of just standing there looking heroic, while CGI does all the heavy lifting. The audience murmured anxiously. Some pulled out phones, already uploading clips to social media. The hashtag Hemsworth meltdown would be trending within minutes. "And the worst part," Chris continued, his voice cracking slightly, "everyone acts like I should be grateful. Like being trapped in this golden cage is some kind of blessing. Like I should smile and say, 'Thank you,' for being turned into a commodity." Lena struck like a snake. "But isn't that exactly what you signed up for? Nobody forced you to take the money, Chris." The words hit him like a physical blow. The truth in them, and the way she delivered it with surgical precision, left him reeling. He started, then stopped, finally seeing the trap he'd walked into. Lena's smile was no longer playful. It was predatory, satisfied. She turned to address the audience with the confidence of someone who had orchestrated every moment of the last 20 minutes. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying the weight of revelation, "this is what happens when we stop letting celebrities hide behind their publicists and scripts. This is the real Chris Hemsworth, angry, entitled, and resentful of the very people who made him a star. Chris felt the blood drain from his face as the full scope of what had happened hit him. The playful insult game, the personal questions, the deliberate provocations, none of it had been spontaneous. "You planned this," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the stunned murmur of the audience. "I gave you the opportunity to be honest," Lena replied smoothly. "You chose to show us who you really are when the cameras are rolling and the mask comes off." The studio camera zoomed in closer, capturing every flicker of realization and panic that crossed Chris's face. In the control room, producers were already cutting together the most damaging sound bites for social media clips. Scarlett found her voice, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. "This is disgusting, Lena. You manipulated him." "I asked questions," Lena countered with mock innocence. "He provided the answers. Nobody forced him to attack you, Scarlett. Nobody made him trash his own career and insult his fans." Chris looked around desperately, at the camera still rolling, at the audience staring at him with a mixture of fascination and judgment, at Scarlett whose expression had shifted from hurt to pity. The studio lights that had felt warm and welcoming now seemed harsh and exposing. "You orchestrated this whole thing," he said, his voice growing stronger as anger replaced shock. "The producers, the questions, the timing, all of it." "What I orchestrated," Lena said, leaning back in her chair with satisfaction, "was the first honest celebrity interview in years. You can't blame me for what came out of your mouth, Chris." The audience erupted in scattered applause and boos, divided between those who felt they'd witnessed something authentic and those who recognized the cruelty of what had just unfolded. Chris stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. The microphone pack pulled against his shirt as he reached for the wire. "Don't you dare," Chris said, his voice low and dangerous as he fumbled with the microphone clipped to his lapel. "Don't you dare pretend this was journalism." Quote, Lena's eyes lit up with the kind of excitement that came from knowing she was about to capture television gold. "Chris, where are you going? We're in the middle of nothing," he snapped, finally freeing the microphone and letting it drop to the floor with a sharp feedback screech. This was a hit job, and you know it. The audience was on its feet now, phones held high, recording every second of his unraveling. The red lights on the cameras seemed to pulse with malevolent life, and Chris could practically feel his career dissolving in real time. "You want authentic?" Chris turned to face the audience directly, his voice carrying over their excited chatter. "Here's authentic. This industry is full of vultures who will smile to your face while they pick your bones clean. And you all eat it up because watching someone fall apart is better entertainment than anything we could ever put on screen." A woman in the front row gasped audibly. Others were frantically typing on their phones, no doubt uploading to Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, feeding the very machine that was now devouring him. Scarlett stood as well, her face a mask of careful neutrality. "Chris, maybe we should just—" "Should what?" He whirled on her, then immediately softened. "I'm sorry, Scarlett. You didn't deserve any of this. You're one of the good ones, and I just—" He trailed off, the weight of what he'd done to her settling on his shoulders. Lena wasn't about to let the moment slip away. "So this is how the mighty Thor handles adversity? By running away?" Chris froze, his hand on the wire that connected his microphone pack to the sound system. For a moment, the entire studio held its breath, waiting to see if he would take the bait one more time. Instead, he smiled. Not the charming, practiced smile that had launched 1,000 magazine covers, but something bitter and resigned. "You know what the difference is between Thor and me?" he said, yanking the wire free with a sharp pop. "Thor's a hero. I'm just an actor who got lucky. And now I'm an actor who's done." Without another word, he strode toward the exit, ignoring Lena's calls for him to come back, ignoring the security guards who stepped aside uncertainly, ignoring everything except the desperate need to escape. Behind him, the audience erupted into chaos, some applauding, others booing, most just holding up their phones to capture the exact moment a superstar's career imploded on live television. The last thing he heard before the studio door slammed shut was Scarlett's voice, quiet but audible in the sudden lull. "That was cruel, Lena. Even for you." The hotel room felt like a tomb. Chris sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing his interview clothes, watching his career disintegrate in real time across multiple screens. His phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, calls from his agent, his publicist, his manager, all of whom he was ignoring. On his laptop, the clips had already gone viral. Hashtag Chris Hemsworth Meltdown was trending worldwide. Someone had edited together a supercut of his worst moments. I'm tired of pretending walking action figure, trapped in this golden cage. Each soundbite was perfectly isolated, stripped of context, weaponized for maximum impact. The memes had started within an hour, Chris's anguished face photoshopped onto crying Wojaks. When you realize you signed up for the money, became an instant reaction gif. The cruelest one showed him as Thor, hammer in hand, with the caption, "What did it cost? Everything." Twitter was a battlefield. His defenders called it an honest moment of vulnerability in a fake industry. His detractors labeled him an entitled millionaire having a tantrum. Both sides were trending, both sides were wrong, and both sides were making him the most talked-about person on the planet for all the wrong reasons. Entertainment Tonight had already assembled a panel to dissect his shocking breakdown. CNN was running a segment on celebrity mental health. The late-night talk show hosts were writing their monologue jokes as he watched. Scarlett had released a statement an hour ago, carefully worded but supportive. "I've worked with Chris for years and have never seen him treat anyone with disrespect." Tonight's interview was designed to provoke, and it succeeded. I hope people will remember that celebrities are human beings with breaking points, just like everyone else. It was more grace than he deserved after what he'd said to her. His phone rang again. This time it was his agent, and this time Chris answered. "Michael." "Jesus Christ, Chris, what the hell were you thinking?" "I wasn't. Disney's already calling. 3 sponsors have pulled out. Your upcoming projects are in review." Michael's voice was strained, professional composure barely holding. "We need to do damage control. I'm thinking a public apology, maybe some charity work." "No," Chris said quietly. "No? Chris, your career is hanging by a thread. We can fix this, but you need to." "No," Chris repeated, staring at his reflection in the dark window. The man looking back wasn't Thor, wasn't even the Chris Hemsworth who'd walked into that studio 3 hours ago. He was someone else entirely, someone stripped of pretense, of image, of everything except the uncomfortable truth of who he'd become. "I think," he said slowly, "it's time to find out who I am when the cameras aren't rolling." He hung up and turned off his phone, finally allowing himself to sit in the silence he'd been running from his entire career. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Quote,